Hello. This week's lesson is going to expand on some of the ideas and pieces of information that we did last week. So if you haven't done last week's lesson, please go back and do that first, otherwise you'll not know what we're talking about. That out the way, so what we're going to look at today is a continuation of the kind of project that we've been working on, which deals with attitudes and ideas about universal basic income. Now, last week we talked about universal basic income and what it is and some facts surrounding it. And universal basic income is basically just a set amount of money that everyone is given every single month, regardless of whether they're working or not working, or whether they're rich or poor, whether they have 10 children or no children. So it's a set amount of money that's given to everybody, and it doesn't matter about their circumstances. That is the universal bit. As we've said before, universal means it applies equally to everyone. So the first thing I want you to do this week is just answer the same question that we answered last week. And you might think, oh, we've already answered this question. But the point of that is that we spent a good amount of time last week kind of thinking about this, and you answered the question, should everyone in Britain be guaranteed a set of money straight away without thinking or doing any research? And now that you've done some research, I want you to have another go at answering that question. And then once you've answered it, look back and see if your ideas have changed. So don't look at your answer first. Have a little look, have a go at answering that question, and then seeing if your ideas have changed a little bit, if they've maybe got a little bit more sophisticated, if they've got a little bit more in depth. See if you've kind of, as I say, changed your idea in any way. So that's the first task, is just to answer the same question, just to see if your ideas have changed. And then the second task that I want you to do is to have a think about responses to ideas. So last week we looked at facts. This week we're going to look at what is sometimes called analysis. And that means trying to apply those facts in order to get an opinion, in order to develop an idea. And when you're having a debate with somebody, you have to analyse and respond to people's ideas. And that means that you look for strengths and weaknesses in them, you look for potential problems, you look for suggestions about what might happen if you took that idea and put it in kind of another context, another place. And to give you an idea about what we mean, Mr. Rob has once again made up a fantastic little worksheet. So you've got the Among Us, is that what the computer game's called? I don't know, I can't remember. I think it is. Characters, and they're having a little discussion. So one of them says, I think there's too much violence in video games. I think you should shut up. You're in a video game. It's a little bit of a Mr. Rob joke. Excellent. And then underneath, I think there's too much violence in video games. And then a response to that could actually be, there's just as much violence on the news or in documentaries. And so that is a kind of analytical point. It's seeing a weakness in someone's argument. And so what we want you to do here is to look at some responses to possible ideas. So the first one, too much screen time is bad for your brain development. And our response is, well, research shows there's no difference in the brains of those who had lots of screen time and those who didn't. That's a possible response. So there's 4 other ones, and I just want you to see if you can think of a response for all 4 of them. So homework is good as it gives extra practice. You write down what your response might be to that. Trump has been a good president. What your response might be to that. Maths should not be mandatory, which means that you have to wear them. People should get to choose. What our response might be to that. And pineapple should never be on a pizza, which is obviously wrong because pineapple is brilliant on pizzas. And then we're going to move on to thinking about different viewpoints in terms of the universal basic income question. So I've put down 2 articles that go through a little bit of background about universal basic income and how it might apply to the pandemic and things like that, and then provide some positives about universal basic income and some negatives. So I want you to have a look through those articles, and there are lots of positives and negatives in them. So I want you just to pick the 2 best ones and put positive 1 and positive 2 there in your own words. So don't just copy it word for word. I will know if you've copied it word for word because I obviously read the articles. So make sure you're putting it in your own words, and by putting it in your own words it means you're thinking about it and you're engaging your brain more. And then the two negatives about the introduction of universal basic income. So basically 2 reasons why introducing universal basic income would be good, and 2 reasons why introducing universal basic income might be bad. So that is kind of what we would say is a secular and non-religious response to an idea, to the idea of universal basic income. And then for the final task, we're going to look at a religious responses to the idea of universal basic income. What I would like you to do is have a look at the various Bible verses that I've put down. And then the first thing I want you to do is try and put it into your own words. And then the second thing is try and decide whether it applies to universal basic income, or whether it supports universal basic income or it goes against universal basic income. So I've done the first one for you. So the first one is a quote from 1 John chapter 3 verse 17, which is, so 1 John is the book, chapter 3 is the first number, and verse 17 is the second number. But whoever has worldly goods and sees his brother or sister in need and closes his heart against him, how does the love of God remain in him? So what do you think this means? So I've said, I think this means if a rich person sees someone else who needs things but doesn't give them anything, then they are not a good person. And in your opinion, does this passage support the introduction of a universal basic income? Give reason to support your opinion. So I think this supports the introduction of universal basic income because it's suggesting that people who have more than enough should help make sure everyone has enough to survive. So what I would like you to do is just have a look at these 2 other Bible quotes. So the first one is from Leviticus chapter 25 verse 35. If your brother becomes poor and cannot maintain himself with you, you shall support him as though he were a stranger, and he shall live with you. And the second one is from Proverbs chapter 20 verse 13. Do not love sleep or you will grow poor. Stay awake and you will have food to spare. So what do you think these 2 quotes mean, and do they support or go against the introduction of universal basic income? And for the final box, I just want you to tell me if you agree with any of those quotes or if you disagree with them. Remember, if you have any questions or if you're having any issues, just send us a wee message and we'll do whatever we can to help you out. But hopefully that has explained what today's task is, and it'll help you kind of develop some ideas about analysing different viewpoints.